I'll let her give you all the information about her. She is a mental health therapist and so much more. But Connie, thank you so much for joining us today. Also, I wanted to speak a little bit about Nebraska Enterprise Fund. We are a community development financial institution. We provide three things really, really well, and that's training, one-on-ones, a lot of mentoring, and we also do loans for small businesses. So we have a couple of events coming up. I just want to mention those, and I'll turn it over to Connie. On September 9th, we have what we call the Small Business Clinic. That's the time for you to come and check up, do a checkup on your business. So there'll be all kinds of resources there. There'll be marketing folks, there'll be financial people, lawyers, there'll be some of everything, SCORE, Nebraska Business Development Center, Nebraska Enterprise Fund. So if you have any issues or concerns with your business, you want to just come to a checkup, check us out. We'll be at the venue September 9th from 9 to 2. You can come in if you want to have a business plan done, or you want to work on a business profile, you'll be able to do that. On October 15th is the next event that we have, and that's our From Startup to Success conference that we have every year. And so that's going to be amazing. We have Dr. Martin, who will open the conference up, who is with the Ambassadors Worship Center. We also have Carmen Tapio, who will be our second keynote speaker for that event. So there's lots going on. Go check out everything at our website. And I'm going to turn it over now to Connie Rabongo. Connie, thank you again. And thanks to Do Space for hosting us. There you go.
Well, thank you, BC, for introducing me. And BC is not wrong. Nebraska Enterprise Fund is amazing. I know I went there when I started, so check it out. Take advantage of their site. I look forward to working with you guys today, talking a little about, being business owners and mental health. I'm very Q&A. If not, I could talk for forever. So feel free if you have any questions or anything like that. But I'll just kind of go on this presentation, and then we'll see where that leads us at the end. And if we don't have any questions or concerns of any kind, then I will just close this out and be mindful of our time together here for an hour. So a little bit about myself. My name again is Connie Rabongo. So I was born in the Congo DRC. I always say that's important because, when you're hearing anything mental health or anything like background and like your life experience always they play a factor in how we kind of deliver our news or we see the world. So I was raised here in Omaha, Nebraska. I, went to Marion, got my bachelor's at Creighton in psychology. I always share with people that I have a minor in women and gender studies and studio arts, and that's because nobody ever asks, but I worked really hard for those, so I think people should know about them. And then I got my master's at UNO in social work, and so there I took the clinical track, and that's kind of what I do now. Is I have worked with like ALS patients in the past, and I have done kind of like that school therapy. I've run some groups, but right now I primarily run my own business, and that business is called Rabongo International. Now, sometimes you'll hear us doing business as Call Connie. So feel free to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. That's not on there, but that's Call Connie. And then I left my contact information, my phone number in this chat. So anyone is also welcome to give me a call at 402-249-4790. Again, go ahead and call Connie. If we don't talk about it today, my specialty is definitely trauma. And so sometimes I like to talk about these things from a trauma lens. But in additional to trauma, I do like sand tray therapy. I love attachment therapy. I love using sand tray. And I do EMDR work. So that's just what I do in a nutshell, besides like, your CBT and all these other things. But that's not why we're here. So let's keep it pushing. Okay, so I start off with the treatment plan. That's my clinical background. So really the idea here is to increase your understanding of mental health as a business owner, and really to give you some tips and tools by the end of this presentation, so that you feel like you have a little bit more knowledge and or intervention support to implement some changes in your agencies, in your small businesses, and or even just personally with yourself. At the end of this PowerPoint, I have a pamphlet that I was having some difficulty. So if you are interested in it, I'll pop it up and we can look at it. And feel free to also reach out for me to get the PDF of that. Okay, so a couple of facts. I think this part of, you know, this presentation is pretty word for word, but um, studies show that 65% experience physical distress at least once a week. And out of that 65%, it is stated that we have, I believe it's 39% of people who were business owners that are stated that they were experiencing issues of like low mood and depression. And then that was also interacting with their ability to go to work. Studies also show that self-employed people typically have poorer like health and mental health results due to the work in comparison to salary workers. And we're going to kind of talk about that at a later slide in greater detail. And then we have that 69% of women owners were divorced, and they attributed a good chunk of that to the emphasis that they placed on their businesses. And so it just, you know, a lot of the information that we have found implements that clearly mental health is kind of an issue that needs to be addressed in the business space. And so let's chit chat in greater detail about that right now. Okay, so the stressors that entrepreneurs identify are sometimes a little different than their employees themselves because they have more responsibilities. So there's the financial concern, and that is like how is the business going to finance itself? Where's the cash flow? Establishing and maintaining financial upkeeping within the business structure. Then we have interpersonal issues. Interpersonal issues are going to be maybe issues that we have between us and our other managers, or us and our clients, or, you know, issues that we're having in general with just kind of roles dynamics within the company. Then we have internal / self-induced stressors. Those are going to be our stressors that we have internally, like, you know, you had a bad day and you're wondering, am I good enough to run this business, or do I have the support to do it, and am I, you know, doing this correctly, or should I have done something else? And so it says here that people who have reportedly higher self-esteem are typically able to manage this area significantly stronger, because it is an internal dialogue that's going on with their own thought process and their own schema and perception of their job and their work. So the job itself is the other identified stressors, and particularly with this, we're talking about the task, you know, making sure things are paid, the everyday daily tasks that have to be accomplished, in addition to what it is that they feel like they do strongly. And then on top of that, you know, managing and making sure that all of these things are implemented throughout their whole system, and not just, you know, their own specific tasks. And then we have for 5, the unpredictability and the risk. And I think this is really where the weight of some of this is getting really put in. And I'm seeing this clinically, and also the research is showing within the pandemic, where we're seeing some issues because there's so much unpredictability with COVID. Again, the need to adjust and become flexible at any moment's notice, with, you know, being in the office, not being in the office, working from home remotely, what communication is going to look like, technology. Also, these would be like financial instability and risk, and, you know, like accounting for crises or instability with the idea of making projections that may not have come into fruition because there was this inability to foresee like negative events, or even also sometimes on a more positive note, when sometimes we have higher success and we don't see the success coming, are we going to crank out the inventory? Are we going to have enough supporting staff? Those other things, like serving the gap and not having the bandwidth to sustain our amount of success, can also be problematic. And then the last thing is work-life balance. And that is the idea that our work is then pouring out into our, you know, our personal life, and having a clear dynamic cut on what that looks like, and answering, you know, maybe answering phone calls 24/7 or responding to emails, or having this idea that they have to balance um, being the boss, but also, you know, having a life outside of work. So, what causes the stress in the workplace? So, with entrepreneurs and generally are in this high risk category. And so this means that, you know, they're in high competitive fields, or they're in survival. And I kind of talked a little bit about that, is like that they're in the responsibility of making sure that that company is in success. And so, you know, it's a top down, you know, how sometimes people talk about like top down. If, you know, who trained the lower level employee was the supervisor, and then who trained the supervisor and was maybe the manager, and then the manager was trained by the owner. So it's almost like this idea that um, those who are entrepreneurs, they have to play a different role. They have to wear many hats. They typically identify strongly with their work. And so they do then salaried employees, because it's, people will be like, that's my baby, or they'll have an emotional reaction to kind of these things. And so they're willing to work harder sometimes and work longer hours, and then really struggle with that division between work-life balance. Crises such as COVID, again, a lot of research talked about the stress level being, was the company ready and prepared for disaster? So obviously no one, I think, foreshadowed COVID-19 happening, but did they have a crisis plan? And if they did, those who were able to implement those crisis plans saw less stress in the workplace because there was a cushion for that. But if you have businesses, especially small businesses or entrepreneurs who are just getting started, the ability to have that cushion hasn't exactly been created within those dynamics. And so we often see like irritability, or issues of fatigue or stress spilling over into their home life. They're like, or being able to bounce that because that plan wasn't there. And obviously, as we go into this, new realm, of COVID and variants, some companies have been able to implement COVID policies, and so they're able to use their own data to fix those gaps. And so it's recommended, if you're new to a field, to look into, what are other people in this area doing, what does the research and data show to help best support you. So there are some benefits, right? Like, me being in a business owner, that you get when you work for yourself. And I think the number one thing is people say, I like my boss, right? Because that's you. It's the autonomy, it's the self-fulfillment, it's doing something that you're passionate, or you're very you're passionate, or you carry a lot of joy about. And so that autonomy is a huge component of it. They in general also report having greater job satisfaction as salaried employees because of these factors. And then, they're the boss. So the other day, I had to take off for a funeral, and my boss understood because I am the boss. And so I have some of that flexibility. So flexibility maybe for vacation, flexibility to create their own schedule, but also, and create that around their lives maybe. But that is maybe where that like work-life balance comes from, is that, I can work in the nighttime, or I can work in the daytime while my kids are at school, and creating that. But they have the flexibility to go on those vacations and to do those things. Also, there's also benefits in having mentor and mentee relationships. We see that entrepreneurs have higher likelihood of having these. And then also those who are receiving mentee/mentor relationships report significantly, out of the counterparts of entrepreneurs or business owners, who do not have a mentor, they report happier job satisfaction and happiness overall. And that is because the mentor is able to help guide them. And also they like model model work ethic, or they sometimes even prevent companies, from creating problems or mistakes that they had made in the past, and eliminates that from the business owner from having to experience that loss or that grief, and just learn and succeed from learning. Okay, so I think this is very important slide, and it's kind of about, are you burned out? And I think there's some intro perspective work that must be done as a business owner, because how you act, and if you're burned out, that pours all into your company and those who are around you. And so here are some signs here, struggling with making decisions or problem solving. Again, overwhelmingness of irritability or feeling sensitive, consistently thinking about work, and that's it, work, 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 work. Neglecting tasks that need to be done. That's like that avoidant of something that I have to do, or I don't want to do this, or even daily tasks outside of your work because you are putting too much emphasis on that, of the tasks that maybe need to get done at work. Drinking and smoking excessively or more than usual. I also like to implement in here is drinking and smoking. Like obviously people do it socially, but also when it becomes as a coping mechanism for some of the stressors that maybe you're not actively expressing. And so I say this, for example, sometimes, I'll crave like having a margarita, but the reality of the situation is I'm craving the margarita, not necessarily because I need a margarita at 12 o'clock in the workday. I'm craving that margarita because I typically have a margarita at happy hour, and that margarita represents like the connections that I make at happy hour. So what I'm actually missing is not necessarily the margarita or the substance that I've used to cope quickly with, but it is the underlying emotion, which is any daily connection. I need to be with people. So I always say, read between the lines sometimes with substances. Avoid social situations and time spent with family. Sometimes that's, either you're avoiding them being honest, or maybe avoiding just interactions that don't make you feel good, in terms of like avoiding the reality in order to make a difference within that burnout. Difficulty concentrating at work and in the home life, or staying in bed and not wanting to ask. And this is past that. We live in Nebraska, and when it snows really heavy and it's just cozy in your bed, but you get up and you're like, I don't want to go to work. I'm talking about when you legitimately don't want to go to work, and you dread it, and then when you get there and you still dread it. That kind of avoidance. So some things that I think that I working at the intervention step is we're going to just kind of cover some different interventions, but here is abiding by like this work-life balance thing. And so some of that stuff that you can do is, create a range of hours and that you're going to commit to work. So whether it's you want to work your typical 9 to 5 and that's what you're going to work, or you're going to, work 9 to 2, take a break from 3 to 7, 8, be with your kids, and then go back from 8 until 12. Like whatever that is having this range. And so that that's the time that you're going to designate to either your family, to yourself. And with that being said, maybe I answer emails 3 times a day, this time, like in the morning, afternoon, and in the evening, and that's it. Once I'm done, the notifications are done until the next morning. Or, one of my boundaries that I have is when I'm in the office, that is when my office phone gets responded to. Obviously, if I'm still doing sessions and whatnot, then, I'll leave that on, but that's always been a boundary. I don't answer clinical calls past, non-work schedules. And with that, I have, my plan. If you're in a crisis, you call 911 or you use the crisis plan that we implemented with you. So just kind of creating structure within your life to create that exercising daily. When you exercise and you get movement, what are they called? You release endorphins. There we go. You release endorphins, and those endorphins allow you to, raise your serotonin, dopamine levels, and things like that. And then that pours back into you, and then increases your mental health. That's the whole mind body connection. So definitely look into that. Exercise plays a huge role on your mental health. Keeping a journal allow even just 5 minutes a day of writing something, reflecting on something, will either allow you to change your perspective or gain insight about the emotions that you're feeling, be able to identify triggers or even common habits or themes that are going on with yourself in order to make an active decision or an active change of behavior, or even maybe an emotional response, because you have an awareness of something that has been identified through journaling. Looking into different communities like networks, Facebook communities, entrepreneurship groups, small business groups, and looking at that for the purpose of improving and support versus comparing and despair what someone has and what you're not having or what you're lacking versus what you can gain from that. Take a walk in a natural setting, spend time with family and friends. Again, that is that connection. A lot of entrepreneurs, and I think, one of their issues that I think I had missed was that they report being lonely. A lot of them report being lonely in their job, in their role, and not necessarily having people to being able to relate to them. Or also they report being lonely in that they don't get to spend a lot of time with good family and friends. And especially when we find ourselves isolated, as we have had to do in 2020, developing and finding external ways to validate yourself through friends and families is always a good option. And then stay productive, maybe take a new class and get yourself involved in something that allows you to still be connected with something of the past and of the future. Interventions to implement. Again, we're going to, mentally acknowledge that business is not as usual. And that is a huge thing to do. These are our interventions that are more so for working with your employees, because when you acknowledge that business is not as usual, you're able to be more flexible, and you're able to gauge different rules, regulations, boundaries for your business and also for your employees. We are not in normal times with COVID, with being I don't want to say locked up, but like with being quarantined. There we go. We aren't able to necessarily connect in office spaces or have office parties, or even just the same to same daily communication that maybe we've had in the office for 10. Maybe you had an in-person meeting and now that's turned into Zoom, and that could totally change how somebody shows up at your workplace, because maybe they were auditory learners and now your meeting has turned kinesthetic, or it has turned visual. And so there might be a lack there. With that being said, it also allows you to, create rules and goals that are realistic for yourselves, for the company, and for your employees. Schedule time off business hours. We talked about that. Accept your employees' emotions, but don't take them personally. I think that's huge for a couple of reasons. One, that is because your employees are going to adjust differently. They adjust differently to being at home. They also are going to adjust differently coming back to home and everything in between. And so sometimes it's like their uncomfortableness has to do with, what their needs are versus like what it is that you're doing, and focusing sometimes on the task, right? So if I say, I don't feel safe in the workplace because we don't have to wear a mask, or maybe because there's no hand sanitizer, instead of taking it personally and being like it's something that you feel like I didn't create a safe environment. When you dissect that, you're able to look at it maybe from a problem solution, which is, let's get a couple of hand sanitizer stations within the building, and then that helps allow you to resolve the situation versus feeling like you have failed the team or the business with whatever conflict that might be. The other huge component that I'm starting to read and also see is that there's also a huge shift with, boomers and other generations who are, after being quarantined and having to reflect on what they value more. There's been more of a value placed on mental health, but also a higher value placed on on mental health, but also on work fulfillment and enjoyment. And so we're often seeing some trends where people don't want to return to the office place, or they're enjoying the flexibility of what working from home has provided. And so know that as you have been adjusting and reflecting, so have your employees. And so some of that shift in that, I decided I don't want to work at a job that maybe that doesn't suit me, that's not something necessarily that is personal to your business, but could be personal to the person's new discoveries about how they feel like their work life or job fulfillment and satisfaction should be filled. There's also like this, I believe it's 69% of people, I have this written down somewhere, so when I see it, maybe I'll give it, so I wasn't going to necessarily share this, but there's a high or a percentage of people who don't necessarily feel comfortable approaching their work because of the stigma that comes along with improving their mental health. But with that being said, the percentage is even higher of those people who report that even though they feel that stigma, they work in organizations that are willing to make change towards that. And I have that in my slides, but somewhere here, I want to say it's 69, might be too long. I think it's like 39 and 48. I know it's 48% for sure that reported that their work had been actively changing that. And if you're a stat person like I am and like research, feel free to ask me and I will give you that very specific. So I want to say it's 38 and for sure 48%. Let's see here. Over communicating. Again, this comes from the idea that your communication has changed. And so it's better to check in with your employees to see how they're feeling. Are things working? Is the way of communication effective? And maybe sharing in different aspects so that way it's retaining with people is also another thing to consider during this time. And then listen to what is being said. Obviously, taking a moment to hear your employees and to take a moment to even listen to common themes that are being said around you or common things that you're saying to yourself. So if you keep hearing yourself saying, I'm tired, or I need more support, or I need this, I need that, or this is a conflict, listen to yourself, because if you hear those things over and over and over again, then there's a lesson to be learned there. But also listen to what's not being said. Those are the nonverbals that we're going to see either in video or in person, or, if someone's uncomfortable or concaved, you're going to pick up on those and ask some questions to make people feel comfortable. And I think I left 4 out, which is, leading by example and sharing your feelings. Research shows that if you are sharing your feelings with your employees and you're opening up and leading that to be a vulnerable spot, business is not as usual, mental health matters, so on and so on. I want you to feel able that you can, problem solve and with me. That creates a more inviting environment to allow your employees to feel like they can honestly delegate or honestly share with you their conflicts, and then that will allow you guys to problem solve through the transitions more smoothly. See here, talking to a professional, go talk to a therapist, go talk to a life coach, do it. A business coach, um, speak to someone who is an expert in what you need. Mentorship, mix things up, change up your routine, change up your schedule, because you know, being in quarantine, that was very important because it felt like, I'm doing this 1, 2, 3. So maybe today go on a walk, the next day do some yoga, change up your routine, your schedule. Also be mindful of like what you're consuming that's in social media. Be mindful of what you're consuming in your circle of friends. Are people supporting you? Do you have people who are in the same kind of role that you are and they can add to your life? Or do you have mentors that can rub off on you because they have extra knowledge? Ask yourself, is this really worth my time? So where is your time being spent? Is it giving you joy? Um, is the reward and payout more beneficial than with you doing this task? Or would it have been better for you to delegate that task to someone else who can do it more sufficiently, and or just do it while you do something that's going to bring in more revenue to the company? Setting goals and making sense of your business, or setting goals that are realistic. And so, maybe you set some goals in 2020 that were like mine, and they were grand, and you're going to accomplish all of these things. But that plan was set up with the intention that, I would be able to interact and be able to do groups. And that didn't happen. So resetting those groups and making them realistic for the time period, making them realistic for your resources and capacity, uh, with being able to push yourself, but not necessarily, um, asking of yourselves to accomplish something that is unrealistic. Do some check-ins with yourself, with your group, to stay on track, and establish maybe a routine to allow things to be more normal. And so, we have natural routines, when we leave our house and then we go to our job and then we get into our work routine. But when we're working from home and we have maybe some more flexibility, the idea is like, okay, from instead of having all this chaos in between, I have to remain structured in the mindset to be at work, and then keep on task of these things and stay on top of things until they spiral. So if you notice something to be a problem, that's not allowing it to um, build until you can't take care of it, and it becomes a bigger strain or bigger stress. Again, we talked about finding your people, your groups, your community, even like your fake community, whether it's listening to a podcast. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, those are my girls. Or, oh God, I just like feel like I'm a part of this bigger um, tribe or community because I'm listening to something. So find your people, disconnect from things that are no longer serving you, changing your scene. I think this is very important, especially if you're working from home. The body starts to understand like state dependent learning. So a lot of people said that they struggled working from home, and that might be because when you're at home, that's been your safe place. So creating maybe an intentional scene or intentional spot to do that work might be helpful, or switching it up and changing your furniture or moving things around, because then your body can identify the memory with and the feeling of like productivity with a different space or a different energy. Be a good sport and be a team player. I know that we're in these odd changes, and so it doesn't quite look the same when your kid doesn't get to go to a school for 2 weeks because they have been exposed or they're sick, and how that might shut down the house. And so people are going to have to pick up in areas where they didn't have to necessarily have to pick up because the resources or the availability was more there. And then making time for yourself. Again, like the whole purpose of this is that when you aren't fulfilled, that trickles down to everybody underneath you and everybody around you. So here is how to make a goal. You know, you want it to be specific. I struggle with that. Specific, measurable, obtainable, realistic, and timely. And so when you do this, it allows you to see change within your goal. You know, so if you set a goal and it's a great goal, but you have no way to measure it, then how do you know that you are like making progress? Because progress isn't necessarily going to go 100%. I always say this to my clients. So if you want to increase joy and you're going to add a different act, you're going to add or increase peace and you want it. So you're going to add yoga to your life. If you don't measure out how many times, you won't see the success necessarily, because you won't go from doing it. Not everybody goes to doing it like 7 days a week. And so, you know, if you notice that, okay, when I first started out, I was only doing it twice, and then eventually started doing it 3 times, you're able to see that gradual progress. Or you're even able to see that I did it 7 days a week and I'm continuing this progress. And then let's just say, because life happens, you dip down to doing it 2 times a week. Well, then you understand, okay, I'm out of alignment with my measurement, with my goal. And then here I provided some mental health resources. So NAMNI is, you know, your national, gosh, it stands for National Alliance of Mental Health. And so that is kind of a big place where a lot of things are as it pertains to mental health, reaching out for groups, or even finding mental health supports, therapists, all that kind of stuff is there. We have the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, Mental Health of America, the Kim Foundation. Again, that's another platform for education and mental health and suicide prevention. Suicide prevention hotline, if you or yourself or you know anyone who is experiencing difficulty with suicidal ideation, you know, if it's an emergency, please contact 911 or take them to the nearest hospital. Let a professional take care of it. I've attached your Psychology Today. That is a platform that you can go to where you can find psychologists in your area, and you can filter them out and search them by category and profession. There are a lot of websites like that, but I would say Psychology Today is one of the biggest that there are. And then below I have a few, such as Grief's Journey. We've been doing a lot of grieving, a lot of loss of jobs, loss of people in general, loss of identity. And so sometimes I find that, you know, while Grief's Journey focuses more on the loss of loved ones, it also applies to other things. Region 6 here in Omaha, you know, you have Community Alliance and then Project Harmony, especially for the littles. And then that is my page of references. So I don't know if I can interact with anyone. Well, it looks like we have 13 people here. So if anybody has any questions, any concerns.
Yeah, we actually have a couple folks in-house that have a couple questions.
Great.
So I'm gonna go ahead and just.
What was the hardest part of getting your business like started? What was your like business plan, like your goals, and like how did you get structured? Like I'm trying to get my business started. I start from home, but just getting planned. Like I work with the little people
Okay.
in behavior, and I'm a single mom, and just getting structured and staying on task because I work from home, and you know, getting my son. I'm a foster mom,
Okay.
and I work with behavior clients that respite. I do respite.
Okay.
I'm just trying, I have my clients, like you said, everything falls on me. So just trying to get structured and getting everybody on task. Like when I had my mom had stage 4. And I had the foster girl kids, I had her, I had the behavior clients, and I just had everything. I didn't know how to get structure. I had the crew, but everybody's like, what do you do? What do you do? And then I had the state coming in, looking at me, regulation. So how coming back in, from the loss, the grief, and coming back in, like I have my state inspection coming up again. I don't want to make the same mistake again. I have my client, my employees. I don't want to make that. I don't want to do the same thing I did before, because I had so much and I didn't know how to be structured. I didn't know how to, I didn't know how to ground myself. So
a couple of things. If you want to message me, you can message me, and I'm gonna share with you my template since I can't attach it here. I'm gonna just see really quick if I can, but it looks like I can't attach anything here. And there are a lot of suggestions that are on there that I think you might be able to benefit from. But a couple of things I hear just in your voice, and this is my therapeutic, dynamic answering a couple of these questions first. The number one thing I'm going to say is have some compassion for yourself, because 2020 was a year of grief, of loss, of restructuring, like identity changing, whether you knew yourself or you didn't know yourself, because the world around you was changing. And something that I didn't necessarily talk a lot about in this, but I did when I first gave a presentation about the same topic, is the idea of when we have chaos and we have confusion and we have grief, it's going to activate all the neural networks within all of that our body is keeping and is being stored within us, of maybe grief, loss, inadequacies, and lack of structure. And so while you think you're just upset about 2020, you're also feeling the isolation of maybe being a 7-year-old when your parents separated and you were at your house. So if that's still dormant inside of you, that emotion of loneliness, of like chaos, is now being activated, because the body understands chaos. It's an emotion, it's a feeling. It doesn't necessarily say this is that specific chaos. So I think compassion is the first thing. The other thing I hear is maybe order and structure that has to happen with your time and how that time is allocated. And so I think for you, maybe logging, how is your time being divided? Where can you even slide in? Can you slide in 15 minutes a day? When would that best serve you? Is it during the lunch day, or like right before you leave work? Can you sit for 15 minutes and work on your plan? Or, that time adds up, because 15 minutes a day turns into 30 in 2 days. And after 3 or 4 days, you've got 2 hours worth of business work done, on top of your 9 to 5 or whatever it is that you're doing, because it seems like you're doing a lot, right? Your business, your respite, your home life. And then so the next thing I'm going to say is, where's the time for you, right? Because you're not going to be able to get all of this done if you're not doing something for your mental health to keep you grounded. Like, regardless if you're running around, what does that look like for you? Does that mean spending time on a walk? Does that mean exercising? Does that mean gathering with someone? Does it mean going to church, meditating and doing yoga? Whatever that time looks like for you, how are you giving back to yourself first? And then when it comes to, the business, BC Clark was not lying at the beginning of this. Take advantage of your supports and your resources. Nebraska Enterprise Fund is amazing. They have like the software that can help you structure your business plan. When I first started, I knew nothing about business. I got a business coach. I continue to do and see business mentors, because it's a learning curve. I am learning things along the way. That's kind of like the instability and in kind of inconsistency that I was talking about. Like there have been surprises and I have to just chalk them up to like a learning curve. Like, oh man, that cost me. And some things you'll learn quicker than others. Because if it's going to cost you monetary, you're like, I just lost an opportunity or thousands of dollars. You're going to learn that maybe a little quicker than you're going to learn like, oops, I forgot to file something. I'll just do it tomorrow. Right. And so get a mentor, get some help to kind of help you with that structure. But Nebraska Enterprise Fund is a great place to start with. I did a lot of stuff there. I learned QuickBooks. I did a QuickBooks training there. I was able to meet other women who were entrepreneurs and also utilize them as mentors. And then I, had help with my business planner looking at it, and that has changed, right? Because that's the flexibility component. When I first started, I was simply just going to do therapy and life coaching. And now, I do therapy, life coaching, and I do healing stuff. And so that's going to, reviewing that and looking at that monthly or yearly, because your needs will change as a business. That's also important. And then UNO also has, if they have a program where they will sit down with you and they will help you write a business plan as well. So there are resources out there. And you're a Black woman, IB Black girl. Correct, I assume you're a Black woman. I should have made that assumption.
I am. Yes, I am.
Oh, I'm glad I did that. I never like to assume. And let me tell you a story where that didn't bite me. Did not bite me in the butt, but it bit someone else, and I don't want to get bitten by that same bug. So I apologize for assuming. But IB Black girl, if you identify as a Black woman, they have really great business resources that I took advantage of as well through the, they're through the Women's Fund. And so I took like a forum or like a workshop for entrepreneur women, and I was able to develop a community and a group there because, the stats show minority women, they're out here and they're an increasing population within entrepreneurship that's growing quickly. But the support and all the resources are needed. So take advantage of those. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to discuss those with you from a Black woman entrepreneur to another, because listen, we have to stay together.
Thank you.
I'm moving. We're mobile.
Hey, I like this. I'm getting my activity in.
Count the steps.
Hi, I should probably take this off. Thanks for your time, first of all. I'm a small graphic designer, and I was just wondering, like, what do you think would be the best way to raise more capital? Because I'm like thinking about opening up a shop or something small, but I'm just kind of looking into like the licensing, the taxes, and like, getting into all the legal forms.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote another question down here in the notepad. The Nebraska Enterprise Fund, what was that?
Yeah, they're who is supporting this Nebraska Enterprise Fund. Start there. Obviously, like my specialty is like therapy, life coaching, but obviously I've gone through some of this. If you're looking to raise capital, look at them. They can help you maybe in the direction of finding ways to get money. There are obviously lots of different areas in how you can get there, whether it's applying through a grant through them, applying through a loan, looking at like different agencies that kind of help guide the startups. Like again, like UNO is a great resource for that. And so that way they can kind of look at what your specific monetary needs or your clients are, like your population is. And what I would recommend is have you started a business plan?
I have my spreadsheets, at home. So I keep track of all my sales and like my clients.
Sure.
And so like I said, I'm just kind of looking at more resources right
Yeah.
now. Make sure, because that's for me, that's like a big important, like in the beginning, if you start off with the wrong resource or with the wrong program or software, that's gonna bite you at the end, And it's always like, I know people who use like graphic design softwares and they go with like some really sketchy ones or something, and then they're crap, or they're not the best or something like that.
Yep.
But I know, like, if you start off in the beginning with a good, maybe a good like fund company or something like that, or a resource, I just want to, keep my options open and see what's out there.
So a couple of things I would recommend for you would be to find someone in your field that's doing it right, or look in your market and see like what, just asking questions either from the consumer perspective or from a mentorship perspective, and kind of gauge and see and test out these things. When it comes to like resources in terms of getting more capital into your business, I would definitely recommend that you get a start on that business plan, because what happens is that is always like a place to start. Like people, it's crazy how they're like, they want to know, like, that's great that you have that's great you have these spreadsheets, but we want to know, like, what is the mission of your company, or what is the purpose? Or
Yeah, I know what you mean.
you get like stopped because they're like, I want to see, don't come to me until X, Y, and Z has happened.
Right.
And
Where do you
so-
see
Yep.
years?
So I would start with the free stuff. Okay. Like I would start with the business plan, and then start with reach, if you know anyone in the industry, reaching
Yeah.
out to them and saying, what are you using? Or, even call companies up and say, hi, I'm looking to get some graphic design stuff done. Could you mind telling me what program you use? Like you gotta finesse, right, your way, if you're not trying to spend a bunch of money on it. But it's kind of this idea of like data collecting to see what's out there, what's working, where can you find your niche, to do so.
Mhm. And once having that business plan, is that something you would take to the Nebraska Enterprise Fund?
They have
And they help you with
they
that?
have business plan, like classes they have like that you can take. They have program where you can do it individually if you go in there. And so they're a great place to like start. And what I have found is when I got started, it's like you meet one person, then they're going to tell you, oh, you need this, and you didn't realize you needed that. And so then you're going to go and you're going to meet this person, and then they're going to introduce you to this person, and it's all going to start, you're going to start collecting knowledge and exchange things, because you're in the beginning stages. So it's like, go with an open mind. And my biggest advice is don't be too embarrassed to ask these great questions, because you're gonna it's accessible to you, right? So soak up that mentorship, and soak up the
Mhm.
ability to have access to free programs. And then I would get that all together, and then start looking at loans or grants, or and talk to the people who do that. Don't take advice
Yeah.
from a therapist about money, but I'll tell you, how do you feel about it, right? But talk to then people who are in the industry about how to make those next steps one at a time. But I will tell you, financials always get asked with a business plan. So unless you're going to be self-funding yourself, they're going to want to see a business plan.
And did you say you started with them too? Like you went with them?
Yeah, when I started, I did a lot of things. So I had a business coach who she ran her own business.
Yeah.
So she worked, she had her own developmental disabled company that she had, and then she has kind of like a mentorship programs. And so I worked with her from that perspective. And then I also worked with NAF to like start a business plan, and I took their like QuickBooks courses. I took a lot of just like I went to, from startup to, I don't know what its real title is, but BC talked about it, like startup to success, I think is what it is. And then I've been to some of their workshops, and I just learn, like I soak up and I learn, and then I meet. And then if I like someone, even if they're not in my field, but I'm like, I like something, right, about them. I always say, even when I'm like, I went to something that was awful. Like it was about, like, I had no business being at this conference, like as a therapist, and it was a bunch of contractors. Like, I don't know how I ended up here, but I always say there's something or someone I can always learn from. So if you go in with that mentality, and if you meet someone and you like their energy, or you like their work ethic, or you admire their ability to manifest or grow their company, ask them specifically about that. So that it doesn't have to be these cold, hard, like, I'm going to you for banking advice because you do banking. Does that make sense? I would
Yeah.
walk up to people and say, I really enjoyed you talking, and I am impressed by the way that you build your company. Can I email you, and can we meet up for coffee? And in those small interactions, I would learn things to then set up for my company.
Yeah.
And I failed. I failed a lot. And I say that because I was just
Learn.
talking to my brother, and he said, the key to being successful is failing fast.
Yeah.
You're going to
Yeah.
fail. It's the idea of not failing, but you're going to take some L's, you're going to learn. And so you're going to adjust and be flexible in those. So I think that comes down to that compassionate component of it as well.
Yeah. I,
Yeah, would you mind maybe putting your email in the chat so that we could get them, and then maybe they could reach out and get the pamphlet that way, that brochure that you were mentioning?
Uh-huh. And the first person who spoke, one thing I wanted to say to her too is that if you're struggling organizing your structure and your time, the best thing you can also do is figure out your why. Most people think that motivation comes because it's like, I'm motivated, but the reality is you've picked up momentum from either a behavior or there is a thought that is driving that momentum or motivation, right? And so if you can click into your why you're getting up, why you're doing things, why you need stuff restructured, it's gonna change your mindset from maybe a chaotic space to a more grounded space, or to a more intentional space or a more purposeful space. Because if that why is, I just have to do it, or it's out of survival, then you're going to run out of survival. Like, I have to do it right. Well, that doesn't feel as good as I'm capable, or I'm creating generational wealth for my offspring, or, all of these other things. So knowing your why, why are you doing this? Then you're going to need to come back to that why when things start shaking up too. On those bad days, it's always good to remember your why.
Right. Thank you so much for
Yes, thank
speaking
you.
today.
We appreciate you so much. Yes.
Good. Like I said,
You're amazing. Thank you.
well, thank you for you guys. I love this kind of stuff. And like I said, follow me on, I would say probably Instagram is my biggest platform where I do a lot of communication. I talk about this kind of stuff. But you have my contact info. Feel free to reach out. And we'll go from there. But I've appreciated this time, and I thank you to do space for hosting me and today's little lunch and learn. Now I'm gonna go have lunch.
Good plan. Thank you again so much.
You're welcome. You take care, and everybody have a wonderful day.
thank you.
Bye-bye.